The lobe-finned fishes possess fleshy fins rather than bony fins. They're fleshy, more muscular looking, and they're supported by thicker bones. The two modern day lobe-finned fishes are lungfishes and coelacanths. This is a picture of a coelacanth. You see how the fins are? They're thicker, sturdier. The amphibians, this will be our next class amphibia. Most of these are tetrapods, meaning they have 4 limbs. They have a smooth and non-scaly skin. They do have lungs. Almost all of the amphibian examples that we have, almost all of the organisms in the class Amphibia have lungs. But they definitely supplement their breathing with their skin. They have a 3-chambered heart, whereas, I don't think I mentioned it to you, but all fishes have a 2-chambered heart. They have one receiving chamber called the atrium and a pumping chamber called the ventricle. But the amphibians have a double loop circulatory pathway with a 3-chambered heart. And I'm going to see if there's a slide that shows you how that works. The amphibians are ectothermic, like the fishes, and their reproduction is aquatic, and they do undergo metamorphosis. Think about a tadpole metamorphosizing into a frog. So good. I'm glad we have this. All right. So we have for the circulatory pathways of the fishes, what you have is a one-way circuit. You have an atrium that receives blood. So this is the heart of the fish. The atrium receives blood. The ventricle pumps it. The blood gets pumped to the gills and picks up oxygen. And then from there gets pumped to everywhere else in the body and delivers that oxygen to all the other body cells. And then it's received back at the atrium. The amphibians and most reptiles have a 3-chambered heart. So they have 2 receiving chambers, 2 atria, and then they have 1 ventricle in which the blood mixes from the oxygen poor blood mixes with the oxygen rich blood. So it's not quite as efficient as a 4-chambered heart like humans have. So it's a 3-chambered heart in amphibians and most reptiles, and what you have is a 2-circuit pathway. Here's the ventricle. The ventricle pumps blood that is mixed, so some of it's oxygen rich and some of it's oxygen poor. So that blood gets pumped to all the cells of the body, comes back to the heart, where this blood would be on the right side of the heart. It's the left side of the page, but it's the right side of the heart. So this blood would be oxygen poor, and it would get pumped to the lungs and the skin capillaries in the amphibians, because they're actually going to supplement their lung breathing with skin breathing. So blood gets pumped to the lungs where it picks up oxygen. It comes back to the left side of the heart, to the left atrium, where it's oxygen rich, mixes in the ventricle with the oxygen poor blood, and then the ventricle pumps again to 2 circuits. One would be the lungs, and the other circuit would be to the systemic circuit, or the body, the organ systems. Okay, so in the last illustration, see, some of the reptiles like crocodiles and birds and mammals have a 4-chambered heart, and this allows for the ventricle, for there to be 2 ventricles. The right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs, and the left ventricle pumps blood to the body tissues, the body systems. This is just an image of a lobe-finned fish. It is thought that the lobe-finned fishes gave rise to the amphibians, and you can see this. I like this a little bit better than the photograph that you saw. of the coelacanth, because it really looks like it's almost like a fin slash arm, or leg. The bones in the lobe-finned fishes are similar to the same bones that you would find in the leg bones of the amphibians, and like a dog or a cat even, and even humans. In the front leg, or what you call arms in humans, you would have the upper bone is the humerus, and then you have two forearm or four-leg bones, and they're called the radius and the ulna. So in the lobe-finned fishes, we see bones like this. You wouldn't have those kinds of bones in ray-finned fishes. All right, diversity in the living amphibians. We have the salamanders and the newts, and the salamanders actually practice internal fertilization. The other amphibians practice external fertilization, and what that means is the eggs are laid. This happens with the fishes as well. The eggs are laid by the female, and then the male swims over the eggs and sprays his sperm. That's external fertilization. Internal means there's some organ like a penis that's inserted into the female, and the eggs are fertilized inside the female's body. So salamanders practice this internal fertilization. We also have frogs and toads, which have no tails as adults, and then the caecilians, which are really interesting. They're legless, sightless, and worm-shaped, so they're blind. And here is a barred tiger salamander. And here's a bullfrog. And then here's a caecilian. This is just talking about medical uses of animals. So I'm going to move on to the class Reptilia. We just got through with the class Amphibia. Class Amphibia had a 3-chambered heart. Class Reptilia have a mixture of organisms that have a 3-chambered heart, and then some of them, like the crocodile and birds, have a 4-chambered heart. And birds are actually in a separate class. They're in the class Aves, but we group them with the reptiles because they are so closely related. Birds are thought to have been evolved from certain dinosaurs, and of course dinosaurs evolved into the class Reptilia. So we sort of overlap these two groups. Characteristics of the class Reptilia is paired limbs, thick scaly skin that's impermeable to water, efficient breathing, so the lungs are really good, whereas in the amphibians the lungs are reduced and small and not as good. They have to supplement their breathing with their skin. And there's a certain type of salamander that doesn't even have lungs. And we have in the reptilia, we have efficient circulation. Even if they don't have 2 ventricles, the ventricle has a septum. So their oxygen poor blood and oxygen rich blood is not mixing like it was with the amphibians. It's much more efficient. We have efficient excretion with well-developed kidneys. The class Reptilia is ectothermic, meaning cold-blooded, just like the amphibians, but birds are an exception to that. The class Aves are endothermic. And we have, with the class Reptilia and the class Aves, we have internal fertilization, and now we've got an amniotic egg. And this is I really don't know if it's an alligator or a crocodile. Let me see if I can find out. Control click. It doesn't even show. So it's one or the other. I can't remember how to tell them apart. Okay, well, so here is our, I don't know, but it just seemed like maybe alligator. But here's our alligator or crocodile. They're both in the crocodilians. That's their classification, as crocodilians. And you can see that there's a very large heart. You have the trachea that leads to the lungs. You have the stomach and the intestines. Kidney doesn't look like our kidneys, but it is a kidney. And then you have the anus and the cloaca, which are separate in these reptilia for some reason. Okay, so turtles are reptilians that have a skull that we call anapsid. That means it has no openings behind the orbit. Let's see if I can show you what I mean. The orbit here, the eye socket, there's no openings behind it. Like for ears, you know. So the turtle skull is anapsid, no openings behind the orbit, and it's the only reptile that has no openings behind the eye sockets. All other reptiles, including birds, have a diapsid skull, which has two openings behind the orbit for ears. Mammals have a synapsid skull that has one opening behind the orbit. So let's see what that looks like. So diapsid, there's two. What that really is, two on each side is what that means. I see. Okay, and then for the synapsid, you have this one temporal opening for the ear and then one orbit for the eyes. So the reptiles are mostly diapsid. The only anapsid reptiles are the turtles. And here you can see some of the reptiles. You can see turtles, and then you have snakes and lizards, which are closely related. You have the tuataras. You have the crocodilians, which includes crocodiles and alligators, and then you have the birds. So the birds and the crocodiles are actually the most closely related of the, I guess you say class Reptilia, even though we classify birds as aves. All right, and here you have the notes on the diversity of living reptiles. Turtles and tortoises have their ribs and thoracic vertebrae are fused into a heavy shell. I think you call it a carapace. They don't have teeth, but they have a sharp beak. Lizards, most lizards have 4 clawed feet, and they're carnivores. Snakes have lost their limbs as an adaptation for burrowing. They are also carnivores, not all of them, but mostly. And some are venomous snakes. Then we have tuataras, which have that third eye. They're the only member of an ancient group that included the common ancestor of modern lizards and snakes. So lizards and snakes are most closely related to each other of all the other reptiles, and then the tuatara is closely related to them. Then you have the crocodilians, which are known for their long, powerful jaws and their muscular tail. And here's some pictures. Here's a green sea turtle, a Gila monster, which is a lizard, rattlesnake, tuatara, and the Nile crocodile. And this shows you what the reptile egg looks like, an amniotic egg. You've got the egg shell on the outside, and then you have the egg white, the albumin. This is the air space. If you've ever tried to crack a hard-boiled egg, you always try to crack it starting there because you can start peeling it and get it going there easier. So that's like the fat end of the egg. That's how I relate to it anyway. But anyway, the amniotic egg protects the embryo a lot better than like a fish egg would, you know. So birds are class aves, but again, we consider them to be closely related, if not, I mean, in some books you would see that they're actually called a reptile. But the fossil record shows that birds evolved from dinosaurs. Their feathers are thought to be modified reptilian scales. Their skeleton is modified so that they can fly. So their collarbone and many other bones are fused, and then their sternum has a keel, which is a structure that is needed in flight. And then they have modified respiration. When we breathe air in to our lungs, we breathe it out. Like it goes into our lungs, our air sacs, and we breathe it right back out. Their respiratory system is different. And we'll look at that because it's hard to explain without showing you a picture. Birds are endothermic. They have well-developed sense organs and nervous system. They have acute vision. They have good instincts. They're very smart. And I think you can see their respiratory system from here. So you have the air comes into the lungs, and then they have these posterior air sacs and then these anterior air sacs. Can you even see them? I can't see the anterior. Let me see if there's another. They don't have a good picture. Okay, I tell you what, when we come back in my next lecture, the next recording, I will start out with explaining how the respiratory system works, and then we will cover mammals.